What are some best practices that some of the most experienced project scheduling experts follow when working with tasks and milestones in a project schedule? I'm Tony Zink, and this is the Project Guide. Hi folks, Tony Zink here, project management author and trainer and creator of the Project Manifesto. I show people how to use tools and techniques to get better results faster on their projects, whether that means saving time, saving money, reducing risks, or providing a more stress-free and pleasant experience for everyone involved in your project. So if you're new here, please consider subscribing or following me on this channel. And if you're not tuning in directly on my website, tonyzink.com, then you can go there to get the video for this episode and others like it, the audio podcast for this episode, the entire written transcript, and other goodies too. Have you ever lost track of important deliverables or activities that were needed for a project because they were missing from your project schedule? Have you or any of your project team members been confused about the meaning or the purpose of a task that was listed in your project schedule? Maybe you found out at the 11th hour that your project team is going to be late completing or delivering something for your project. I'm a firm believer that a well-structured and well-managed project schedule is essential to running a successful project. A great project schedule can help you to predict the work required, the people required, and the time required, and the cost required to deliver what your customer wants. However, although many people might agree with this notion, very few project managers are able to actually carry it out. Perhaps they don't have the right scheduling tools available to them, or they're not given the time to create a proper project schedule, or maybe they just don't know how to do it. I'm going to share with you 4 best practices that project scheduling experts recommend when you're working with tasks and milestones in a project schedule. There are many principles, practices, and rules of thumb that people follow when they're creating and maintaining project schedules, and I can't possibly do them all justice here in this short episode. Keep coming back though, and I'll have more for you soon. Although every project scheduling tool is different in terms of their capabilities, features, and functions, you should be able to follow these practices regardless of which project scheduling tool you choose to use. The first principle that I'll share with you today is start by creating a milestone for each project deliverable. Project milestones are typically used to indicate discrete points of achievement along a project's timeline, and they're typically used to represent deliverables that you've agreed to produce for your customer. If you've already created a scope document and a work breakdown structure, and I hope that you have by this point in your project planning process, then copy all of the deliverables from your scope document or WBS and transfer them into your project schedule. This will become the initial set of milestones that will establish the foundation and the overall structure of your project schedule. For example, if you're building a conveyor system for your customer, your main deliverables might include a functional requirements document, a set of design drawings, an assembled and tested conveyor system, a set of maintenance manuals, and a training class for your customer's maintenance personnel. Milestones are not tasks and should not be represented in your project schedule in such a way that they can be confused with one another. When adding a milestone to your project schedule, flag it as a milestone by using a standard naming convention, a flag or option in your project scheduling software, or by setting its duration to 0. Milestones should not be confused with tasks that project team members will complete. Each task in your project schedule should be performed over a duration of time, but a milestone occurs at a single point in time, often when something is completed or accomplished, so it should have a 0 duration. Also, since they're not tasks, they should not have any project team members assigned to them, since people work on tasks, not milestones. Principle number 2 is to add the tasks that are required to complete each project deliverable. Once you've itemized all of your project deliverables and represented them in your project schedule as milestones, it's time to describe the work that your project team will need to perform to produce each one of those deliverables. For each deliverable milestone that you've added to your project schedule, insert some blank rows above that deliverable and create a list of activities or tasks that your team will need to perform in order to produce that deliverable. This is a great time to get your project team involved to help you identify all of the required tasks, as you may not be familiar enough with the hands-on work to identify everything. Every task identified should have a purpose and should be necessary to complete a deliverable in your schedule. If it's not absolutely necessary, then don't include it. And as I mentioned earlier, tasks are intended to represent the actual work that people will perform on your project. So every task that you've identified in your project schedule should have someone assigned to it. Either someone who will perform the work or someone who is responsible for supervising the work so that it gets completed properly. Another principle that I recommend that you follow in your project schedule is to create task and milestone naming conventions. If you're not completely familiar with the individual tasks that need to be performed throughout your project, or if you have multiple people assisting you with identifying those tasks, then it's very common to end up with a set of tasks that are confusing to people who may be looking at your project schedule, including team members, their managers, or your customer. A project is a collaborative process, meaning that there are often many people involved throughout the duration of the project, and it's important to ensure that everyone who might review your schedule fully understands the meaning and the purpose of all of the individual tasks. If people read your project schedule and they can't understand any of the individual tasks, then they may lose confidence in the schedule and follow another plan, or worse yet, no plan at all. Therefore, I highly recommend that you create a set of naming conventions for the tasks and milestones in your project schedule, and make sure that everyone on your project team understands them. Since tasks are supposed to represent work that team members are performing, start all task names with verbs or action words, such as create requirements document, rather than simply calling the same task requirements document. Milestone names should indicate some sort of completion or accomplishment. So name them accordingly, such as requirements document complete. Don't create task names that are short and ambiguous, especially if some tasks are repeated multiple times throughout the project. If there are 3 waves of testing, for example, don't simply add 3 tasks to your project schedule named perform testing. Instead, be more specific about the type of testing being performed during each wave, such as perform unit testing, perform final acceptance testing. This is especially important if individual tasks may be read out of context, such as in a weekly team member assignments report. Don't create task names that are too long either. This will make for a messy and difficult to read project schedule. And if tasks are displayed in reports or other extracts, then those may be difficult to read as well. A task name should not include work instructions describing how to complete the task. The task name should be exactly long enough that the people involved understand what the task is. If additional information or work instructions need to be written, then don't store them in the task name, but somewhere else associated with the task, such as a task notes area. The fourth and final principle that I'm going to share with you today is to create task granularity rules. Task names can be too short and too long, and so can task durations. If a task is not broken down or decomposed far enough, then it'll be more difficult for you to measure the progress that team members are making on that task. If a task is represented as a month long in your project schedule, do you want to find out at the end of that month that the team will not be finishing the task on time? The longer the tasks are in your project schedule, the more difficult it will be to accurately measure the team's progress. Establish criteria for adding tasks to your project schedule. Tasks that are too long will be difficult to accurately track, so I recommend breaking them into smaller tasks. And tasks that are too short will add unnecessary administrative burden for you and your team, so I recommend consolidating those into larger tasks. A typical rule of thumb that many experienced project managers follow for task durations is between 1 and 10 days. If a task is less than 1 day duration, then you may want to consider consolidating it with another task. If a task is more than 10 days duration, then you may want to consider breaking it into shorter tasks. Another rule of thumb that many experienced project managers follow for task work effort is between 4 and 40 hours. So if a task is less than 4 hours of work effort, then you may want to consider consolidating it with another task. On the other hand, if a task is more than 40 hours of work effort, then you may want to consider breaking it into smaller tasks. These are general guidelines that I recommend, but every project is different and has different requirements, so you may need to adjust these rules to best meet your team's needs. So to wrap up, if you do these 4 things, create a milestone for each project deliverable, add the tasks required to complete each project deliverable, create task and milestone naming conventions, and create task granularity rules, then you should be able to keep better track of important deliverables and activities that are needed for your project. You should be able to provide more clarity to your project team members about the tasks that are listed in your project schedule. And you should be able to more accurately track your team members' progress on the tasks in your project and predict earlier that things are running behind schedule. Thanks for tuning in and spending this time with me. I hope that you've enjoyed these tips and that you'll find them useful. I'd like to take a quick moment and remind you of these 2 things. Number 1, if you're not tuning in directly on my website, then you can visit my site at tonyzink.com. You can watch this video and others like it. You can listen to the audio podcast. You can read the entire written transcript and find other goodies there too. And number 2, please post your thoughts in the comments section. Do you have any questions, tips, or recommendations that you'd like to share? How do you handle situations like this? Some of the best questions and tips come from the folks like you, the project management community, the people who are out there in the trenches every day working on projects. So definitely connect with everybody down in the comments section. Until I see you next time, go back out there and keep building great things.